I remember the first time I walked that trail. The air was colder than the forest around it, as if the path itself exhaled a different kind of breath. Mist rolled low along the ground, curling around my boots like pale fingers reaching out. My lantern buzzed softly, the light too weak to cut through the fog, flickering as though it didn't want to reveal what lay ahead. The woods were quiet, too quiet, not even the usual rustle of leaves or distant chirp of crickets, just the sound of my own footsteps, crunching against damp earth, swallowed almost instantly by the silence. It felt like walking into a place the world had forgotten, an abandoned trail, left to the ghosts of memory. Halfway down the winding path, I noticed the trees leaning inward, their branches tangling like arms, blotting out the stars above. I couldn't help but feel I was being led somewhere, not lost, but guided. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, just behind me, and when I turned, there was no one there, only the fog shifting, as though something had just stepped out of sight. That's when I realized I never should have walked that trail alone. The trail was empty. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, sharp and earthy. It was late autumn, and the sun had already gone, leaving only a thin gray glow across the forest floor. I walked slowly, each footstep pressed into soft, damp dirt. A chill ran down my arms. Then I saw it, a lantern, swinging gently from a low tree branch. Its flame flickered pale and yellow, though no one was near to hold it. I stopped. The wind whispered through branches. The lantern swayed as if moved by some quiet hand I couldn't see. Curiosity pulled me forward. Each step felt heavy, each breath sharp against the cold. I reached the spot where it hung last night, but it wasn't there, and now it was closer. I hadn't moved that fast, yet the lantern had shifted further down the path. It floated lightly between the trees, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched across the trail. I called out softly. No answer came, just the swinging of the flame, gentle and persistent, lighting the darkness like a heartbeat. Something rustled behind me. Leaves brushed against my jacket. I didn't turn. The lantern drifted again. Higher, closer to the middle of the path this time. Its glow touched the tips of my shoes, then my hands. I felt watched. Something in the hush of the forest pressed close. A stillness settled over the air, heavier than any fog. The flame trembled, not with the wind, but with something else. It pulsed softly, and I could almost hear it, a faint hum, like breath held too long. I wanted to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. Every instinct screamed to run, but my eyes followed the lantern, drawn down the winding trail. It paused for a moment, swinging gently above a mossy log. I stepped closer. The light reflected in the droplets on the bark, making the shadows ripple like water. I could feel it now, the air thicker, warmer, carrying the faint smell of smoke, though no fire burned. I swallowed, taste sharp and metallic on my tongue. Then it moved again, faster, almost skipping between the trees. I ran after it, barefoot over cold dirt and hidden roots, the flame bobbing like a heartbeat ahead. I reached the clearing. The lantern hung from a crooked branch, swaying slowly. And for the first time, I noticed the shadows around it, tall, thin, leaning slightly as if watching from every tree. I held my breath. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. A whisper rose in the air, soft and crackling. I couldn't make the words out, but it seemed to come from the lantern itself, curling around my ears, brushing my neck. Then the flame flickered violently, and I saw it, not a hand, not a body, but something tall and pale, reflected in the glass of the lantern. It didn't move toward me. It just stood there. I blinked. The reflection vanished. The lantern swung gently again, calm, innocent almost. I left it there. I turned back down the path, my footsteps silent, swallowed by the dark. But when I glanced behind me, even from the distance, it was gone. I don't know if it moved on or waited, but every night the lantern appears, in a different spot along the trail, swinging, breathing, watching, and I keep walking, even though I know it's there. The bridge was old, swollen with rain, planks dark and slick beneath my boots. It arched over the river like a skeleton, abandoned for years. Mist drifted along the surface of the water, curling around rocks and roots. I stepped onto the first plank. It groaned softly under my weight. The fog smelled damp, sharp, and cold. Then I saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the bridge, pale, almost gray in the fog, unmoving. I froze. The air seemed to tighten around my chest. A quiet thrum through my ears, like the river itself was holding its breath. I called out softly. No answer, only the whisper of water, brushing past the banks, carrying the scent of wet moss. The figure did not move, not a twitch of a hand, not a turn of the head, just pale and still, facing the far end of the bridge. I took a step forward, then another. The planks shivered beneath me, creaking in protest. It was closer now, or maybe I was moving faster than I realized. The fog pressed around me, curling into my hair and my sleeves. The figure's shape wavered. A hand lifted slightly, then vanished. The mist swirled thickly, pulling at the edges of the bridge, erasing what I thought I saw. I stopped, my heart thumping in my ears. There was a sound then, faint and wet, something brushing along the wood beneath the figure. I leaned closer, trying to see, but as I blinked, it was gone, vanished into the river mist. The fog hung heavier, almost suffocating. I could hear water lapping against the old supports, small splashes like soft footsteps. The bridge swayed gently, though no wind moved it. I whispered my own name, tried to steady my voice. No echo answered, just the river and the fog. Something shifted behind me. A shadow, tall and thin, stretched across the planks. I spun, but nothing was there, only the mist curling into the hollow spaces of the forest beyond. I moved forward again. Each step felt slower, heavier. The fog thickened, brushing my arms and neck like cold fingers. Then I saw it, again, not fully, not clearly, a pale glimmer at the edge of the bridge. It didn't walk. It hovered slightly above the surface of the river, as if the mist itself had shaped it into a form. I tried to look away, but something kept my gaze fixed. A pull, soft and insistent, guided me to the spot where it had vanished. The boards groaned beneath me. Water whispered below. I imagined it reaching up, pale hands pressing through the mist toward me. I stumbled, breath catching, my chest tight, eyes stinging with cold. And then it was gone. The figure, the shape, the glimmer, vanished. Only the mist remained, curling alive, hiding secrets in its gray folds that I stood there a long time, listening. The river flowed on, indifferent. The bridge swayed slightly under the weight of the fog. And then I noticed the footprints. Faint, pale impressions in the wet wood. Not mine alone. They started from the center of the bridge and stopped abruptly, and oh, one was there. No one could have been. I backed away slowly. Every step echoed loudly on the planks. The fog pressed closer, colder, like it wanted me to hurry or to stay. At the edge of the forest, the mist thinned. The river's whisper softened into normal sounds. And for a moment, I almost thought it was over. But when I looked back, the bridge seemed darker, heavier, and I could swear I saw a pale shape lingering at the far end, just beyond where the fog could reach. Watching, waiting, I walked on, feet cold, heart louder than the river, but I could still feel the presence behind the mist, just out of reach. It's there every time I pass, always in the fog, always on the bridge, pale still waiting, and I never linger too long, because I've learned some things vanish only to watch. The trail narrowed here. Tall pines leaned overhead, their needles brushing together in soft, constant rustle. The sky was a pale gray, and the scent of wet earth lingered in the cool air. I walked slowly. Every footstep pressed into damp moss and fallen leaves. And then I heard it. Another step, soft, deliberate, in perfect rhythm with mine. I froze. The air was still, except for that echo mirroring me exactly. It didn't sound like a creature. It sounded like someone walking behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just a trail, twisting forward under the shadow of the pines. I started again. Step pause, and there it was, perfectly following. My chest tightened. My breath came slower, careful. The trail seemed longer than before, stretched somehow by the sound. I stopped. The footsteps didn't. They kept walking. Soft, steady, inevitable. I turned again. Nothing, only the whisper of wind through the trees, the smell of damp needles, the crunch of leaves under my own boots. I began walking faster, but the rhythm behind me kept pace. Faster still, and still they matched me. I could almost feel the pressure, like someone breathing on the back of my neck. I tried calling out. My voice shook, the echo of my own words swallowed up by the trail. Only the footsteps answered, never slowing, never breaking. I dared to glance over my shoulder. The fog had thickened between the trees. I saw shapes, perhaps just shadows of branches, perhaps something more, and then a fleeting movement, too fast catch. I ran, feet pounding into mud and stone. The trail twisted, turned, doubled back on itself in ways that didn't feel natural. But the footsteps didn't change. Every time I slowed, they approached. Every time I stopped, they continued, as if the trail itself had taken a life of its own. My lungs burned. Cold sweat slid down my back. The pines pressed closer, whispering in dry rustle and shadowed movement. And then a sound beneath them. Not my boots, not the ground. A faint dragging, like nails across bark. I looked back once. Nothing, only fog curling between the trees, hiding, waiting. I could feel it then. Not behind me, not in front. All around, the steps no longer needed the ground. They fell in rhythm, always one beat behind, echoing mine, and then a pause. I froze mid-step. No echo followed. Silence pressed in. The forest held its breath. And then, softly, behind me, steps began again. Slower now, deliberate, closer. I dared not run. I dared not breathe. The rhythm, uneven now, pressed against the back of my mind like ice. A twig snapped. I flinched. The echo of that snap lingered long after, stretching unnaturally through the fog. And then another and another. The steps multiplied. Not just one pair, but many. Soft, endless, following my own, keeping time, never stopping. I stumbled. Fallen leaves clung to my hands. The smell of wet pine filled my nose. And in that moment of panic, they slowed. I turned quickly. Nothing again. Only mist twisting around tree trunks, and shadows bending where light should not reach. I ran again. The trail curved sharply. Every turn seemed familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. It was endless. The footsteps followed, always following. I stopped once more. This time, I didn't hear my own echo, only the steady, soft march behind me. I dared to glance over my shoulder, and in the fog, I saw it. A shadow moving with impossible grace. Tall, thin, almost human, but not. Its form stretched and shifted, slipping through trees like water through fingers. I wanted to scream, but my voice refused. My throat tight, my chest hollow. The footsteps slowed again. And finally they stopped. Silence. The forest pressed in. Fog rolled between trunks like a living thing. And I realized with a cold certainty, I had never walked alone. The trail curved through a quiet grove. Branches arched overhead, bare now, stripped by late autumn winds. The ground smelled damp, rich with fallen leaves and something older, decayed. I noticed a tree first by its shape. Hollow at the center, dark as shadow, split wide enough to look inside. The bark was rough against my fingers as I brushed near it, cold and damp. Then I heard it, a faint sob, soft, almost hidden in the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the forest. I froze. The sound trembled, thin and fragile, as if something was trapped inside. I leaned closer, breath shallow, smelling wet wood and faint decay. It stopped. I held my breath. The forest waited. The faint sob began again, closer this time, rising from the hollow. I looked inside. Darkness. Nothing but shadow pooling in the hollow. And then something shifted. A movement deep in the blackness. Subtle, yet deliberate. The air grew colder, wet with mist that seeped from the hollow like slow smoke. I stepped back, heart thundering. The forest seemed quieter now, but somehow heavier, closer. The sobbing came again, sharper, closer, almost human. I pressed my face near the opening. Darkness pressed back. I smelled damp earth and something sweeter, like old tears, stale and bitter. A shape seemed to flicker in the shadows. I thought I saw eyes, just a glimmer, too quick to hold. A pale curve of something watching me from the depth. Then it shifted, moving further inside. I stumbled back. Branches scraped my arms. A cold breeze washed through, carrying the hollow's whisper of sorrow. The sobbing slowed, but now there was another sound. A scrape, low and deliberate, like claws against the inner wood. Something breathing, heavy and wet, too close. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But my feet, rooted to the spot. The tree seemed alive. The hollow twisted, bending shadows around itself. The sobs came again, this time closer, louder, more desperate. I heard a low whisper. Not words, not quite language. Just a sound curling around my ears, brushing my neck. It smelled of wet earth and something metallic, blood or rust. I couldn't tell. I leaned in once more. The darkness inside the hollow seemed to lean back, stretching, reaching. A shape emerged and retracted, too fast, too thin to be human. My heart froze. The sob stopped. Silence pressed in. Then a subtle shift. The shadow moved at the edge of the hollow, stretching toward me. I smelled its breath, cold, wet, faintly sweet. I stepped back, stumbling on roots. The air felt thick, sticky, pressing against my skin like water. A whisper of movement brushed my shoulder. And then the sobbing returned. Closer. It circled the tree, echoing in the hollow, surrounding me. Not just inside the tree, everywhere. I turned to run. The forest pressed in. Every step felt heavy. Every shadow seemed alive, flicking just at the corner of my eyes. I glanced back at the hollow. The darkness inside pulsed, stretching, shifting. I could sense something moving, not running, not walking, but alive, deliberate, patient. The sobs faded, but a presence remained. Cold, heavy, watching, waiting. I didn't linger. I left the grove quickly, my boots sinking into wet leaves. The hollow tree disappeared behind me, silent, but I could still feel it there, waiting. Even now, the memory lingers. Soft sobs echo in the corners of my mind. And I know, somewhere in the forest, the hollow waits, patient, dark, and full of breath. The path narrowed again, framed by trees with bare branches reaching like fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting leaves. A quiet pressed around me, soft and heavy, almost like it had weight. I saw him before I realized I was looking. A man walking ahead, ragged coat, frayed at the cuffs, hanging loosely from his shoulders. I tried to catch up, but no matter how fast I walked, he stayed just ahead. A shadow always beyond reach. The fog thickened. It curled around his ankles, brushing my own. Each step I took seemed to echo too loudly. Each glance toward him made him farther, yet closer, all at once. I called softly. No reply. His head turned slightly, but never fully faced me. Just a hint of movement, pale against the gray of the fog. I slowed. The coat flapped lightly in the still air. I could hear the rustle of fabric, subtle, like someone breathing softly beside me. He paused. I paused. I could see the outline of his face now, faint and blurred, as if smeared across a fog window. No features, only pale skin stretched thin and indistinct. I stepped closer. The air smelled colder here, sharper, like ice and damp metal. My hands tingled. A subtle hum pressed into my ears. He moved again. Not fast, not hurried, just deliberately, slowly, keeping that impossible distance ahead. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My eyes followed him, drawn to the ragged coat, the pale, blurred face, the slow rhythm of his steps. Every now and then, the fog shifted, and for a fleeting second, I thought his form leaned closer to me. But when I blinked, he was still ahead, unbroken by distance, untouchable. I whispered his name. Nothing answered. The trail held only my own voice, swallowed by the cold air. The world seemed to stretch. The trees leaned inward, branches brushing like hands. I could hear leaves scraping together above him, though no wind stirred. He turned once, not fully, just a tilt of the head. And in that moment, the face sharpened for an instant, Pale, almost human, but wrong. Edges blurred, eyes hollow, mouth undefined. I stumbled. The ground felt slippery. Cold seeped into my boots, my fingers, my chest. When I looked back, I thought I saw movement in the fog behind me, but it was nothing, just shadows stretching between the trees. Or so I told myself. The man in the coat never spoke, never looked fully at me, yet I could feel him, the presence, the weight, the deliberate patience. I wanted to run, but the trail seemed longer with every step. The fog pressed tighter, brushing my neck, crawling into my hair. I stopped again. He paused too. The distance between us barely changed. The rhythm of his steps matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. And then silence. No footsteps at all. No rustle of coat. The fog thickened, curling around the trail. I strained my eyes, searching. Nothing. The man was gone. The pale shape, the blurred face, the ragged coat, vanished. I waited, breath shallow, cold, clinging to my skin. Only the forest remained, but I could feel it, the space where he had been, just beyond reach. A stillness that pressed against my chest, a presence that lingered, patient, watching. I moved on, each step careful, deliberate. The fog followed, curling at the edges, brushing my face. And though the trail seemed empty, I knew he was still there somewhere, just beyond vision, just beyond understanding. I do not look back, not fully, not anymore, because even in his absence, I feel him, waiting. The fog rolled in slowly that morning. It pressed through the trees, curling along the trail, thick and silent. The ground smelled damp and cold, sharp with moss and wet leaves. I walked carefully. The fog muffled everything. My steps, the wind, even the faint drip of water from branches. It was soft, but heavy, like the world had been muted. Then I heard it, a rustling. Not leaves, not animals. Something deliberate, brushing closer, circling me without a sound of its own weight. I stopped. The fog curled around my boots, my legs, my hands. The rustling followed, just at the edge of perception, always behind a shadow. I whispered to myself. No answer, just a faint shiver of the air, the scent of wet earth and cold metal. The fog shifted. Shapes moved within it, dark, stretching, impossible. They weren't fully human, not fully shadows, just a suggestion of form, bending and flowing with the mist. I took a cautious step. The rustling grew sharper, closer. Branches scraping softly, like nails against bark. I felt in the hair on my arms, on the back of my neck, brushing along my skin like cold fingers. I stopped again. The forest fell silent. Only the fog moved. It seemed alive, curling, shifting, pushing me along the trail without my consent. Something whispered then, soft, low, almost a breath in my ear. I couldn't make out words, but it carried a weight, a presence that pressed close, close enough to feel my skin prickle. I stepped forward, faster, but the rustling followed. Not like footsteps, no rhythm at all, just movement, around me, behind me, brushing through the fog. I tried to turn. Nothing, only the gray haze, thick and unyielding. A shadow flickered briefly between two trees, long and thin. I blinked. It was gone. The trail narrowed. Roots twisted like veins beneath my boots. Each step made the fog pulse and shiver. The rustling shifted, now above me, brushing against branches. Low whispers curled around my ears, brushing my hair, lingering in my breath. I want to call out, but my voice stuck in my throat. My chest felt hollow. The fog seemed to press closer, heavier, like water weighing me down. Then I noticed it. The shadows were moving in the rhythm of someone or something, following me, not stepping, not walking, just shifting, soft, deliberate, patient. I quickened my pace. The rustling grew louder, closer, brushing past my shoulders, along my arms. The whispers circled me now, low and constant, almost melodic, but wrong. Something alive, moving just beyond sight. I stumbled, falling on damp leaves. The fog swirled thicker, brushing against my face. A cold breath touched my neck. Not wind, not animal, something else. I scrambled to my feet. The trail twisted, curved, doubled back strangely. Every turn looked familiar, yet unfamiliar, and the rustling never left. Always there, always circling. I dared to glance behind me. Nothing, but I could feel it. The presence. Patient, moving, breathing with the fog itself. I ran. Each step felt heavier than the last. Branches tore at my sleeves. Roots caught my boots. The whispers followed, growing in volume, yet remaining impossible to pinpoint. I stopped at a clearing. The fog hung low, thick as smoke. The rustling had ceased for a moment, and I thought I was alone. Then a shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. Long, thin, bending in ways no human could. I could feel it watching, moving, alive in the mist, waiting. I didn't linger. I turned back the way I came. The fog swallowed me. The rustling began again, soft and deliberate, brushing closer than before. Even now I remember it, the feeling of unseen fingers tracing the air around me, the whispers curling, following, never leaving, and the fog alive, always alive. The trail curved sharply near a bend, and there it was, a cabin, small and forgotten, half swallowed by moss and fog, would darken with age, windows cracked and clouded with dust. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though no chimney had been used for decades. I stepped closer. The leaves crunched softly under my boots. The fog curled around the corners of the cabin, clinging to the walls, moving like water over stone. The door hung slightly ajar. It swung gently with the wind, creaking in rhythm with my heartbeat. I paused, noticing the smell. Something damp, something stale, something alive. Inside, the dust was thick, undisturbed for years. The floorboards groaned faintly under my weight. And then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh. Pressed deep into the dust. Not mine. Not animal. I froze. The smell of old wood, damp air, and something metallic filled my nostrils. Each breath came sharp and shallow. I stepped closer. The prints led toward the back of the cabin. Small, careful, deliberate. No door had been opened. No window had moved. I followed them. The boards creaked beneath me, each one echoing in the empty room. A faint draft brushed my neck, carrying the smell of wet earth. The fog outside pressed against the broken windows, curling inside. The footprints stopped at the far wall. I leaned closer. Nothing, just dust, shadows, and a faint whisper of movement behind me. I turned. The doorway was empty, but the air had shifted. A presence, cold and patient, pressed just behind me. The cabin felt alive. Each corner seemed to pulse with something unseen. The walls breathed with fog. The floorboard sighed under invisible weight. I stepped back. The footprints hadn't moved, yet I could feel them, trailing me, pressing close, patient, deliberate. The smell of smoke intensified. Not fresh, not warm. Cold, like ashes long dead, carried through damp air. It brushed my face, my hair lingering on my hands. I dared to glance around the room. Shadows shifted where light should not reach. A low hum rose in my ears, soft, like breath held too long. I moved toward the doorway, but the cabin seemed to stretch. The walls curved slightly, the floor sloping just enough to unbalance me. The fog outside thickened, pressing through the cracks, curling like fingers. A sound came from the corner, soft, wet, deliberate, a scraping along the wood, faint, rhythmic. I didn't look. I couldn't. Then a faint shift behind me, a weight pressing into the air. Something had passed where I had just been standing. I turned once more. Nothing. The doorway remained empty, the footprints untouched in dust. I left the cabin. The door swung shut behind me, gentle, final. The fog clung tighter now, brushing my arms and face. I could smell wetwood, old smoke, and the faint trace of something alive lingering just inside. I glanced back. The cabin seemed smaller now, silent, but I knew it wasn't empty. The footprints vanished into the dust, yet I could still feel them, trailing, waiting, patient. I walked on. The trail curved further. The fog thickened. The forest seemed quieter, waiting, holding its breath. And I could still smell the cabin. Cold smoke, damp wood, and something older watching. Even now, I remember it. The quiet weight pressing to the fog, the faint rustle that was never mine, the footprints that should not have existed. I do not linger near bends anymore. Not since the cabin. Not since the trail whispered of things alive in forgotten corners. But the memory, it follows. The wind moved differently that evening. Soft at first, brushing leaves along the trail, curling around my sleeves, brushing my hair across my face. The air smelled of damp pine and cold earth, sharp in the fading light. Then I heard it. Faint bells. Delicate, high-pitched tinny. Tinkling. Echoing softly through the trees. I paused. The trail seemed quieter somehow, as if the forest had hushed to listen. Each bell echoed again, lingering longer than it should, fading slowly but never completely. I whisper my own name. No reply, only the soft tinkle, distant, gentle, and wrong. I step forward. The bells move with me, or I move with them. Every step, a soft echo, a metallic hum brushing my ears. The fog pressed closer, curling through the trees, soft and cold. I tried to pinpoint the sound. I thought it came from the left, from a clearing just beyond the trail. I turned my head. It had moved, now to the right, always shifting, always following. I quickened my pace, but no matter how far I walked, the tinkling never faded. It circled me, weaving through the fog, brushing my ears, my shoulders, my neck. Cold fingers of wind followed each note. I stopped. The air thickened. The trail seemed longer. The forest stretched, twisted, bending just enough to disorient me. The bells sounded again. Closer this time, almost beside me. A soft hum threaded through them, low and vibrating against my chest. I could feel it pressing against my ribs. I turned. Nothing. Just fog curling around tree trunks, brushing my boots, moving like water over stone. No one was there. I whispered again. Still the bells, soft, mocking, trailing every word. The fog thickened further. I could barely see the trail ahead. Branches pressed low, brushing my hair and shoulders. The wind shifted constantly, carrying a faint tinkle wherever I moved. I tried to run, each step heavier than the last. The bells followed, always in rhythm, faint but deliberate, echoing longer than possible. I stumbled over a root. Cold sweat slid down my back. The forest smelled sharper, metallic, like something buried beneath the leaves. The bells sounded again, closer now, ringing directly beside me. I dared to glance behind. The trail looked empty. But the sound, it was there, soft, persistent, pressing against the air, against my ears, against my skin. I stopped completely. The wind died. The forest held its breath. Only the bells remained. I could feel them circling, not from the trees, not from the air. They existed everywhere at once, trailing, following, watching. I stepped forward slowly. The bells echoed again, shifting with each movement, like they were attached to me, tethered to my pulse. The fog pressed against my face, wet and cold, carrying a faint metallic tang. I paused at the edge of the clearing. The trees leaned inward, branches brushing together like whispering hands. The tinkling slowed, softening, curling around the space, wrapping me in sound. I waited. The forest fell silent. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves. Only the faint echo of bells, fading, and then nothing. The trail ahead was empty, silent. I could feel the absence of sound pressing against my ears, sharper than the notes themselves. The bells were gone, or perhaps they had never left. I walked on carefully. The fog lingered. The forest smelled damp and metallic, faintly alive. I did not look back, but even now I remember the soft tinkle that seemed to follow every step, the wind that carried it closer than it should have been, the silence that came after, heavier than the sound itself. I know the bells will return, softly, deliberately, tethered to the trail, tethered to me, waiting. The trail narrowed between two dense groves. Mist lingered low, curling around roots and rocks, cold and damp against my skin. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves, moss, and something older, something hidden. I walked slowly, my boots pressed into soft dirt, each step echoing slightly in the quiet. The forest was still, too still, like it was holding its breath. Then I noticed it. A shadow, tall and thin, crossing the path. It moved smoothly, almost drifting, though nothing nearby could cast it. I stopped, heart thundering softly. The shadow paused at the edge of the trees. I looked around. No light source, no figure, nothing that should have made it. Yet it lingered there, stretching unnaturally, swaying slightly as if watching. I took a careful step forward. The shadow shifted just a little. No noise, no rustle of leaves, only the faint pulse of its presence. I called softly. No reply, only the sound of my own breathing and the faint hum of the forest. The shadow moved again, across the path, disappearing behind a cluster of trees. I blinked. When I looked again, it had shifted slightly, closer to where I stood. I felt the cold press of the air, a weight, subtle but undeniable, settling across my shoulders. The mist curled around my boots and fingers, brushing against my skin like a whisper. I stepped backward. Nothing followed, yet the shadow remained, just at the edge of vision, flickering, leaning impossible. The wind stirred slightly. Branches scratched against each other, leaves brushing my arms. But the shadow moved independently of all this, gliding silently along the path, never quite touching the ground. I turned, scanning the trees. Fog twisted between trunks, curling like smoke. Every shadow looked ordinary at first, until I noticed the one that wasn't. Tall, thin, shifting just beyond focus. I whispered to myself, try to steady my breath. The forest waited. The shadows seemed to breathe with the fog itself, pulsing slightly just out of reach. I stepped forward. It moved again, across the trail, pausing briefly at the roots of a gnarled tree. I caught a glimpse of its shape, elongated, swaying unnaturally, impossible in dimension. I froze. Something low whispered through the mist. Not words, not quite language, just a breath curling around my ears. The forest seemed to lean closer, pressing in, silent except for the faint pulse of the shadow. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing. No shape. No figure. Yet I could feel it there. The shadow stretched slightly, leaning, flickering. It did not move toward me. It simply existed, patient, deliberate, watching from the edge of perception. I tried to step aside. The trail curved unnaturally. The fog seemed to twist, pressing close, curling against my sleeves. And the shadow followed, silent, insistent, impossibly still. I stopped, heart pounding, breath shallow. The forest waited. The shadow paused, exactly where it had been. And then it disappeared. Not gradually, not fading, simply gone, leaving only the faintest distortion in the mist, a sense of weight, of presence, lingering. I exhaled slowly. The forest seemed larger now, emptier, heavier. The trail stretched ahead, normal, yet somehow wrong. I felt the absence of the shadow pressing into the fog, a void I could sense but not touch. I walked on, step by step, careful, slow. Every so often I glanced at the trees. Every so often I felt it, the patient weight of something watching, waiting just beyond the reach of vision. The shadow may be gone, but I know it lingers, always at the edge, always just beyond the fog, and I cannot ignore it. The trail curved ahead, but I sensed something off. The fog was thicker now, curling low around roots and rocks, damp against my boots. The air smelled of wet leaves and earth, sharp with cold. I walked carefully, each step pressed into soft soil, the crunch of fallen leaves muffled by the fog. Branches brushed my shoulders like fingers, bending, curling, guiding me or trapping me. The path twisted again. I turned a corner, and then I was back where I had started. I froze. The trail behind me stretched identically to before. The trees, the roots, the bend, it all looked the same. The fog pressed closer, heavy and wet, curling around my arms. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the mist. I walked forward, faster this time, counting my steps, marking the trees. But the trail doubled back again. Cold seeped into my boots. My breath came shallow. The air smelled sharper now, metallic, like something hidden beneath the leaves. I stopped. The forest seemed to lean closer. The fog thickened. curling between trunks, pressing at my ears and neck. I could feel it, watching. I stepped forward once more. The trail twisted unnaturally. And again, I returned to the same point. Each time, the air felt colder. Each time, the space around me felt emptier. I whispered softly. No reply. Only the wind brushing leaves. Only the faint rustle of distant branches. The fog shifted. Shapes moved within it. Fleeting, impossible. Long limbs, thin and dark, brushing at the corners of my vision. I blinked. They vanished. I walked faster. My boots sank into damp soil. Branches scratched my sleeves. The trail doubled back once more. I tried turning left, right, back, forward. It made no difference. The cold pressed deeper into my chest. A quiet dread settled over me. I realized the trail was no longer a path. It was a circle, a loop, a prison of fog and trees. The wind whispered then. Soft, low, curling around my ears. Not words, but intent. Something in the forest wanted me to stay. To follow the trail forever. I stopped completely. The fog hung thick and low. I could barely see my boots. Branches pressed closer. The air tasted metallic, like iron and damp moss. I glanced around. Every tree looked identical. Every root twisted the same way. The trail behind me. The trail ahead, one and the same. A movement flickered at the edge of the fog. Tall, thin, bending impossibly, shifting. Just for a moment and then gone. I could feel it watching, waiting, patient. I whispered my own name. The fog swallowed it. The trail seemed to pulse, stretching, curling, bending around me. I could feel the emptiness grow heavier. I stepped forward. The forest pressed closer. The fog shifted, thick and alive. The trail doubled back again. And again, each return colder. Each return emptier. I tried to run. My legs moved, but the path remained the same. I could hear leaves crunching under my boots. I could hear my breath, shallow and sharp. I could feel the fog pressing at my skin, curling around my hair and neck. I stopped once more and realized I had nowhere to go. The trail was endless, the forest silent except for my heartbeat, the fog heavy and unyielding. I whispered softly, shaking. No answer, only the pressure of unseen eyes, patient, deliberate. The trail had doubled back endlessly, and I was trapped within its loop. I moved slowly forward again, step by step, the fog curling, pressing. Heavy! I knew the trail would never end, and I would keep walking, forever. The trail opened near the cliff. The air smelled sharp, salt, wet earth, and something bitter. Fog rolled along the edge, curling over rocks and roots. I heard it first, soft weeping, gentle, almost human, carried by the wind. It echoed faintly, tugging at the edges of the trail. I stepped closer. The ground was slick with moss. Cold air brushed my cheeks and hands. Carrying the sound closer, I leaned over the cliff. Nothing, no one below, only jagged rocks, mist curling and the faint glimmer of something metallic, an old lantern, faintly lit, swaying on a jagged rock. The weeping seemed to rise from it, curling up into fog. I stepped back. The wind carried my breath away. The tears, soft and endless, whispered against the stone. I tried to move on. The trail curved ahead, but every step felt heavier. The weeping followed, faint yet insistent, pressing at my ears. I called out softly. No reply, only the lantern bob in the distance, pale and fragile. I looked closer. The light flickered violently, and for an instant, I thought I saw a movement beside it, a pale figure, leaning close to the rock, silent, still. I blinked. Nothing. The lantern swung gently again, alone in the mist. I left the cliff quickly. The weeping faded slowly, but I could still feel it, echoing inside me, soft and hollow. The fog was thick that morning. It clung to my clothes, my hair, my arms. The trail twisted ahead, sharp and uncertain. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost carried by the mist. My name. I stopped. The voice repeated it, closer this time, curling around my ears, brushing my neck. I whispered back, No answer. Only the repetition. Soft, deliberate, impossible. The trail seemed to stretch. The trees leaned inward, branches brushing my shoulders. The fog thickened, curling like fingers around my boots. I tried to move faster. The whisper followed. It shifted, circling me, low, patient, deliberate. I glanced behind. Nothing. No shape, no figure. Only the fog, alive, moving with intent. I whisper my name again, and the whisper repeated, softer this time, almost inside my skull. It knew me. It had always known me. I dare not turn fully. The trail seemed endless, curling forward and back in impossible loops. The fog pressed against my skin, damp and heavy. The whisper drew closer, pressing against my chest and neck. I ran. The voice followed, closer, curling into my hair, brushing my hands. Each step, the fog seemed alive, moving with intent. I stopped suddenly. The whisper paused. Silence pressed in, thicker than the fog. I felt it everywhere, waiting. I walked on, careful, slow, tense. The voice may have vanished, but it will return. It always knows my name. The clearing opened unexpectedly. Fog rolled low across the grass. A single bench sat in the center, old and weathered. I stepped forward slowly. The wood was damp under my hands. The air smelled of wet earth and something faintly bitter. I sat. The bench groaned softly. A shadow shifted beside me. I froze. No one was there. The fog curled closer. Branches whispered in the wind. I felt a weight, subtle, like someone leaning just beyond my shoulder. I tried to move. The sensation didn't leave. A soft presence, patient and still, pressing close. I leaned forward slightly. The shadow seemed to stretch, bending along the edge of vision. I could feel its gaze not on me, but through me. The forest pressed in around the clearing. The fog thickened. The bench creaked softly. I did not move again. I left slowly. The presence lingered. I could feel it as I walked away. Patient, waiting, never leaving. The trail narrowed again. The trees leaned inward. The fog thickened, curling low along the roots and rocks. Then I saw them, eyes, glowing faintly between the trees. Too far to see clearly, but too constant to ignore. I stopped. The air pressed against my chest. The eyes did not blink. They did not move, but they followed. I whispered softly. No reply, only the quiet hum of fog shifting along branches. I moved forward slowly. The eyes flickered, always in the same spot, always watching. Branches scratched my arms. The forest seemed alive. The fog shifted with intent, curling around my legs, brushing my face. I dared to glance again. The eyes remained patient, flickering softly, unwavering. I could feel a presence. Not human. Waiting, still deliberate. I left the trail quicker. The eyes did not leave. Even when the forest opened again, I could feel them just beyond the fog. The path was dim, gray under thick fog. Then I saw them. Lanterns. A row stretching forward along the trail, their light pale and flickering. I stepped forward. The soft glow pressed gently against my eyes. Shadows flickered across trees. The fog curled low around my ankles. I turned back. The lanterns behind me, all gone. Darkness swallowed them completely. I continued forward. Step by step, the lantern stretched ahead, longer than the trail should allow. Each light trembled slightly, as if alive. I paused. A cold draft brushed my shoulders. The trail seemed longer with every step. The fog pressed closer. I glanced behind again. The darkness remained. No lanterns. Only the trail I'd already walked, swallowed by fog. I felt it then. A presence, patient, deliberate, pressing close. I could smell faint smoke, cold and metallic. I walked on slowly. The lanterns trembled ahead, pale and fragile. Each step echoed softly. The fog moved with them. I stopped briefly. The lanterns flickered violently. For an instant, I thought I saw something beside them, tall, thin, watching. And then the lights softened again. The shadows disappeared. Only the trail remained. I moved on, step by step, careful, slow. The The lanterns will return, and the darkness will follow. The trail narrowed beneath tall pines. Mist curled low along roots and rocks. The air smelled damp, sharp with cold. I rested on a fallen log. Closing my eyes for a moment, the silence pressed gently against me. Branches brushed my hair. The fog clung to my sleeves. Then I felt it, a hand, cold, wet and heavy on my shoulder. I froze, heart thundering. I turned slowly. Nothing. The air was still. The fog swirled around me, thick and curling. I touched my shoulder. No mark, no hand, only the chill lingering, stubborn, impossible. I stepped forward slowly. The trail seemed longer now. The fog pressed closer, brushing my face, my hair, my arms. Every so often, I thought I felt it again, light, deliberate, waiting. I whispered softly. No answer, only the weight of unseen fingers pressing near, patient, deliberate. I did not look back again, but I could feel it, always there at the edge of my awareness. Patient, watching. A small stream crossed the trail. The water was cold and clear, reflecting the gray sky. The air smelled faintly of moss and wet stone. I knelt beside it, peering into the surface. I saw my reflection, still, familiar. Then it blinked. My eyes had not. The reflection smiled slightly, though my face remained neutral. I recoiled. The stream rippled, carrying the reflection away. But it blinked again, soft, deliberate, impossible. The air grew colder. Mist curled low over the rocks, brushing my fingers. I could hear the faint rush of water and something else. A low hum, almost like breath. I looked closer. The reflection stretched, elongated, flickering with pale light. It mimicked nothing but itself, moving freely, unbound. I stood quickly. The water settled. The reflection was normal again, or so it seemed. I stepped back. The forest felt thicker, heavier. Mist brushed my hair. A faint pressure pressed at my chest. I walked on slowly, step by step, careful, deliberate. But the image lingered. The eyes in the water had followed me, and I know they will wait. The trail stretched into fog. The further I walked, the longer it grew. Roots twisted like veins beneath my boots. Branches pressed low, brushing my hair and arms. I walked faster. The end never appeared. No light, no clearing, nothing but twisting trees and curling fog. The air smelled damp, metallic, sharp. My breath came short, mist curling with each exhale. I stopped briefly. The trail seemed longer in both directions. No matter how far I went, I returned to the same point. The forest pressed closer. Shadows shifted where none should exist. Branches tapped softly at my sleeves, my neck, my face. I tried turning back. The trail double bent, twisted impossibly. It had no end, only the stretch of fog, pressing, curling, patient. I whispered my name softly. No answer, only the fog curling, alive, around me. Step by step, I walked. The path stretched endlessly. The forest pressed in. The fog pressed tighter. I realized I was alone, and the trail would never let me leave. The clearing opened. A bench sat beneath twisted trees. Fog curled low along the grass, damp and cold. A man sat there, quiet, motionless, staring. I stopped. The air smelled damp, faintly metallic. Branches whispered in the fog. I stepped closer. His shadow stretched wrong, longer than it should, twisting across the ground with the fog. I whispered softly. No reply. I dared a closer look. His face was pale, indistinct, blurred like a memory fading. Eyes that should have held recognition held nothing. The shadow moved slightly. Not him, not fully, but it stretched, twisting, growing as the fog thickened. I stepped back. The clearing felt smaller, tighter. The fog pressed against my arms and chest. I left the bench slowly. The man did not move. His shadow lingered, stretching along the ground, twisting, impossible. Even now I can feel it, watching, patient, waiting in the fog. Old trail signs leaned crooked along the path. Each pointed a different way. The wood was weathered, gray, splintered with age. The air smelled damp, like rot and moss. I chose a path. Step by step, careful. The leaves crunched softly under my boots. The trail twisted. Bends repeated themselves. I glimpsed the same signs, broken and leaning, pointing in different directions. I stopped. The fog pressed in, thick and low. The air smelled metallic now, sharp and bitter. I tried another path. It led back to the same point. Every choice returned me here. I whispered softly. No answer. Only the fog curling around the signs, patient, deliberate. I moved cautiously, step by step. The trail bent impossibly. Branches scraped at my sleeves. The fog pressed close. Each time I turned, I returned. The signs repeated. The trail was endless, and I realized it would never end. I walked slowly, careful, deliberate, step by step. The forest pressed closer. The fog followed. I was trapped in its patient, looping silence. The trail narrowed beneath skeletal trees. Fog curled low along roots and rocks, damp against my boots. The air smelled faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in water. I saw her first. A young girl, pale, drifting along the path. Her dress white and tattered, brushing the leaves as she hummed softly. I stepped closer. The fog moved with her, curling around her ankles. Her face was hidden beneath shadows, hair falling across it like a curtain. I whispered softly. She didn't look up. The humming continued, soft, constant, gentle, wrong. I tried to pass her, but the trail seemed to bend, keeping her just ahead. Step by step, I followed. The lantern I carried flickered, bright, sudden, violent, and then I saw her face. Pale, smooth, impossible. Eyes too dark, a mouth that moved only slightly, humming still. It was a face I could not forget. I stumbled back. The fog pressed close, curling around me. Her humming continued. I ran, step by step, careful, deliberate. The trail twisted behind me, but her presence lingered in the mist. Even now, I remember the white dress, the pale face, the humming that will never leave my mind. The trail was quiet. Soft leaves pressed under my boots. Mist curled low, brushing my ankles, my arms, my hair. Then I heard it. Steps, soft, deliberate, following mine, perfectly in rhythm. I stopped. The echo continued. Not me, not my movement, just steps. I walked again. The steps matched me, step for step. Closer now, brushing the fog. I tried running. The echo sped with me. Faster, closer. I stopped abruptly. The echo did not. It kept walking. Alone. Branches brushed my face. Leaves rustled beneath invisible feet. A cold presence pressed close, patient, deliberate. I ran again. Step by step, careful, desperate. The echoes followed. Then the sound changed. They were no longer my echo. They moved independently. Following, watching, patient. I stumbled. The forest seemed alive. Every step echoed too loudly. The fog curled closer. The unseen footsteps relentless. I dared to glance behind. Nothing. Yet I could feel them. Always there, always following, always patient. The trail narrowed beneath heavy trees. Fog rolled in thick, curling low around roots and rocks. The air smelled damp, metallic, and sharp. I stepped forward. The fog pressed close. Branches brushed my shoulders. Leaves pressed against my boots like fingers. Then I realized the fog was moving differently. It waited, thicker in some places, curling around the trail, curling around me. Shapes emerged, dark, impossible, shifting just beyond focus. Patient, watching. I whispered softly. No answer, only the low press of cold air, brushing my hair and neck. I tried to step forward faster. The fog shifted. Dark shapes gathered within it. Slowly, deliberately, the air grew heavier. Each breath burned slightly. The fog pressed against my chest. The shapes moved closer, edges flickering, bending. I froze. The forest pressed in. Branches twisted like claws. The shapes, patient, impossible, breathing with the mist. I moved slowly, step by step, careful. The fog followed, curling around my boots, brushing my hands. The dark shapes shifted, still waiting. I whisper my name softly. The fog responded. Not words, not language. Just movement, deliberate and patient. I left the trail as quickly as I could. The shapes remained in the fog, watching, waiting. I felt them in the corners of my mind. Even now, the trail narrowed beneath skeletal trees. Fog curled low around roots and rocks. The air smelled damp and metallic. A lantern glimmered ahead, alone, flickering softly, casting pale light. I stepped closer. The fog pressed thick, curling around my boots. The light trembled in rhythm with my heartbeat. I reached the lantern. It flickered violently. And then I saw it. Tall, impossible. Shadows stretched long beside the pale glow. It moved slightly, deliberate, patient. I stepped back. The fog pressed closer. Breath shallow, chest tight. The presence beside the lantern alive. I whispered softly. No answer. Only the flickering light, casting impossible shadows along the trail. I moved slowly onward. The lantern trembled. The shadow remained. Patient, waiting. I did not turn back. Step by step, careful, deliberate. The fog pressed against me, alive. The presence lingered in the pale glow. Even now I feel it. Tall, patient, waiting beside the trail. The final lantern never truly fades. I finally saw the exit. Light broke through the fog, pale and soft. The air smelled of damp earth and faint pine. I stepped forward. Relief pressed gently against my chest. The trail beneath my boots seemed normal. I turned back once, and the trail was gone, swallowed by endless fog. No trees, no roots, no path, only mist stretching in every direction. I froze. The forest had vanished. The fog pressed thick and heavy. I was alone. Step by step, I moved forward. The air pressed against me, damp, metallic, heavy. The mist curled around my hair and shoulders, curling like fingers. I whispered softly. No answer, only the weight of unseen eyes pressing close. I walked on. The exit remained ahead, impossible, distant. The fog shifted with intent. Shadows flickered just beyond my vision. Every step felt longer than the last. I tried to move faster. The trail stretched endlessly. The fog pressed closer. Cold, damp, patient. I stopped completely and realized the trail had truly ended. Behind me, nothing. Ahead, nothing but endless mist. I walked slowly, step by step, careful, deliberate. The fog pressed against me, alive. The forest unseen, impossible, swallowing everything I knew. I whispered my name. No answer. Only the fog curling around me, patient, deliberate, eternal. I am alone. The trail is gone, and the fog waits.